So this year I didn't manage to make a video for Halloween. Instead, and this might be a little late, but you know, it's the thought that counts, I thought I would show you a modern urban horror story. Come with me. So let's make our way to Frankfurt, where, if you're an average tourist, you might spend a day marvelling at some of the sights. Ooh. Ah. And at this time of year, watch them decorate the Christmas tree. But of course there are many places in Frankfurt that the average tourist doesn't get to. Let me show you one of the most controversial. We're taking the tram west to, let's be honest, a pretty dull place off the beaten track. And the name of this square gives a hint as to what this once was. This is the site of the old goods station, when it was no longer needed and demolished, along with all the tracks leading to it. The big question was what to do with a great big empty space. Well, the obvious answer was to redevelop it, and redevelop it they did. Frankfurt's main goods terminal was built in the late 19th century at the same time as the main passenger terminal and just a short distance away from it. But by the late 20th century, most of the factories had moved out of central Frankfurt and more freight was being transported by road, so the goods terminal was no longer needed. There is now a shopping mall where the main terminal building was, and where all the tracks and sidings used to be, this area, there are now offices and apartments, the new Europa Quarter, and also the opportunity for the trade fair to expand. But of course, when the plans were first unveiled to an excited public, the criticisms came in thick and fast. The buildings were, it was felt, soulless and unimaginative, urban design by numbers. Apparently, this is called the brick. The local Frankfurter Allgemeine newspaper asked why we can't build livable cities anymore, a few years before moving their editorial staff into one of the new office blocks they just complained about. Now granted, in the middle of November, just about any place looks really dire, but if this were just about the bland and unimaginative architecture, well, we could argue about that because that's a matter of personal taste. But there is one thing about this area that is objectively bad. I wonder if you can spot it. The central boulevard Europa Allee is wide and long and straight. Maybe if there were a lot more trees here it wouldn't be so bad, but as it is, it not only cuts an unsightly scar right across Frankfurt's western districts, but it can sometimes be a pretty efficient wind tunnel. And let me tell you, at this time of year, it really is awful. It might be an improvement over the old railway sidings here, but that's not enough to make it a pleasant place to live and work. There is one advantage though. The new U-Bahn line, which by the way is 2 years late, will, when it's finally finished, pop out of the tunnel at this point and run for the rest of the journey at street level in the middle of the road. That wasn't the original plan though, they only did that to save money. Musician Elias Gottstein even wrote a song complaining about the Europa Quarter and other similar projects, basically saying they had sucked the life out of the city and turned it into a ghost town. Many people have drawn even more drastic parallels. In fact, this development reminds locals so strongly of the worst of Soviet-era architecture that some of them have started calling it Stalin Avenue. But perhaps this isn't all that surprising, as the initial concept for the redevelopment was prepared by a firm of architects founded by a certain Albert Speer, son of the more famous Albert Speer, who just happened to be Hitler's favourite architect. I'm not trying to suggest anything about the younger Speer's political views, but I assume he learned from his father. And there is something about totalitarian dictators that makes them favour the kind of urban planning that doesn't have a lot of humanity to it. There is another less obvious issue with this place. There was a requirement for a minimum amount of subsidised housing. Well, apparently, it doesn't meet that requirement. Since 2014, local regulations have stipulated that in any major redevelopment of this kind, at least 30% of new apartments should be subsidized accommodation for low-income families. The figure for the Europa Quarter is more like 20%. It's feared this may cause rents to rise in neighbouring districts, which is not what you want during a recession and a housing shortage. Near the western end, the road goes into a tunnel allowing a park to be built, which must have looked good on the drawing board. I mean, I do understand the logic, and okay, it's a park, but there really is a keen wind up here. I wonder if it's better in the summer. It's raised up slightly, and instead of trees to act as windbreaks, there is just grass. And it's not flat, so you can't even use it for ball games. This is what developers hastily add to the plans when they suddenly remember the design brief asked for parkland. Ha! Looks like Charlie Brown lives here. It may not be the worst example of modern urban redevelopment, but it's definitely not the best. I'm not sure I agree with Elias Gottstein that Frankfurt used to be the coolest city in the world, but I do think it deserved a lot better than this. If you enjoyed this video and would like to support me to make more like it, you can do so by signing up for a channel membership. Click the join button or use the link in the description for more information.